They said the basement of the old hotel was sealed shut for a reason. When I finally forced my way in, I understood why no one was supposed to see what lived down there. I'm not proud of how far I'll go for a thrill, but I've always had this urge to prove the story's wrong. It was my third time visiting the Diplomat Hotel in Baguio, crumbling, cold, and riddled with rumors of headless priests, poltergeists, and nuns who were never buried. Oh, there was one place none of the local guides would talk about: the basement. They said it was sealed decades ago. Something about the last exorcism that happened in that place not going right. That was all I needed to hear. I slipped off with a flashlight and bolt cutter I'd brought in my backpack. I found the rusted door behind a collapsed stairwell, nearly hidden beneath vines and debris. So, one rainy afternoon, while the others were snapping selfies near the chapel ruin, the air was thick and wet and smelled faintly of rust and incense. It took me 3 tries to snap the chain. The door creaked open slower than it should have, and the cold that met me was unnatural, not just underground cold. No sound of wind, no dripping water, just the buzz of my flashlight. It was like the place had been holding its breath, and now it had just exhaled. I stepped inside, and the light barely reached the walls. Old tiles cracked under my feet. I descended, not from fear exactly, but from something deeper. Like my nerves were warning me before my brain could catch up. The basement was quiet, didn't acknowledge the beam of light. Now fixed directly on her, then I heard it. Soft, deliberate weeping. The crime was distant, muffled, but clear enough to make my skin prickle. It came from the far corner, past a row of overturned pews and a toppled crucifix. At first I thought it might be a prank another tourist, maybe even a vagrant, but as I approached, my body began to shake, and then I saw her. Her hands covered her face. She didn't look up. A nun crouched in the corner, shoulders trembling beneath a tattered black habit. An empty void, pitch black and humming faintly, like the moment before a scream. Her body didn't move, but the veil twitched, as if something unseen was shifting beneath it. The veil floated where a face should be held in place by something that wasn't there. She just wept. I called out, unsure of what else to say. Her hands still hung limply where her lap would be. Her legs didn't dangle. No response. I stepped closer, something in my gut screaming not to. Are you okay? And then she lifted her head, slowly, almost weightlessly. That's when I realized I didn't say much, just muttered something about slipping on wet tiles. There was nothing beneath the veil. No face, no skin, no skull, just space. I don't even remember my feet hitting the stairs. I just remember bursting through the door into daylight, tripping into the weeds, and vomiting in the grass, while my heart tried to tear itself out of my chest. I froze. My hand shook so badly, the beam jittered across the room, casting warped shadows across the walls. That's when the weeping stopped. Not faded stopped, instant, like someone had hit mute. And in the silence, the veil began to rise. Not just her head, her entire form, lifting off the ground without movement. Because she had no legs. Just more of that darkness extending downward like smoke in reverse. I turned and ran. I didn't look back. I didn't breathe. The others found me half an hour later, pale and shaking. But I never went back, and sometimes late at night you still hear that weeping, soft, just behind the wall, as if something followed me out. I locked my van, closed the curtains, and drifted off to sleep just outside the gates of the Diplomat Hotel. When I opened my eyes, I was on the cold, concrete floor of an upper room with no windows, no door handle, and no memory of how I got inside. I'm not the superstitious type. I travel solo, shoot abandoned places for fun, and sleep in my van to save on hostels. So, when I parked just outside the gates of the infamous Diplomat Hotel in Baguio, I wasn't skadooshus tired from the long drive up from Manila. I wrapped myself tighter in my jacket, pulled my cap low, and let the silence lull me into sleep. The plan was to nap for an hour or two before sunrise. I wanted to get early shots of the ruins before the tourist crowd came in. The gate was locked, as expected. No one around, not even a guard. I rolled down my window just enough for air, drew the curtain across, and lay back. I remember the cold creeping in, that sharp mountain chill, like something sealed away for years. My eyes adjusted slowly in the dim light, filtering through a single high window. I staggered toward the doorway only to find that there was no knob, just a flat, decayed wooden slab where a handle used to be. I pushed, pulled, nothing. But when I woke up, it wasn't silent anymore. I was lying on a hard floor, not the soft mat of my van concrete, rough, dusty. I sat up, groggy and confused, and the first thing I noticed was the scent, old stone and mildew, moss-covered walls, graffiti, no bed, no curtain, no van. I was inside the ruins. Panic crept in as I scrambled to my feet, heart pounding. Anything. How the hell did I get in here? I muttered aloud, hoping my voice would anchor me to some kind of logic. Hello, I whispered, was breathing, shallow, raspy, right against the door, like something had sucked all the warmth out of the stone. The only sound that came back was the soft flutter of wings from somewhere above me, pigeons, maybe, or bats. I scanned the room for my camera bag, my phone, anything familiar, and what looked like scratch marks trailing up the wall beside the door frame, deep, ragged gouges, as if someone tried to claw their way out. The room felt colder, now naturally cold. Nothing, not from outside light. They moved against the light, as if something inside the room was blocking it, something tall. Just a dark stain on the floor near the corner. My mouth went dry. I banged on the door, shouting, hoping a caretaker or security guard might hear me. The seconds stretched. The air felt heavier. And then I heard it, just legs, barely visible in the edge of the window light. Headless, motionless, standing right in the middle of the room. Footsteps, soft, deliberate, just outside the door. Anything but what it looked like. Down crumbling stairs, past broken arches, out into the overgrown courtyard. And just past the rusted gate was my van, still locked, curtains still drawn. Pros. They stopped right at the other side. I waited for a voice, and not bought what I got instead. But there was one new file in my photo folder taken. Sometime during that hour, I backed away slowly, heart slamming in my chest. No answer, just that sound. Cold air rushed in, real air, morning light. Then, without warning, the breathing stopped, and the silence that followed felt even worse, like something was waiting for me to speak again. I pressed my back to the opposite wall, trying to control my breaths. The shadows on the walls began to shift. That's when I saw it. A figure, not a full person. I didn't hear it enter. It had just appeared. I closed my eyes tight, told myself this was a dream. Sleep paralysis, dehydration. When I opened them again, it was gone. The room was empty. I rushed back to the door, slamming my fists against it, screaming now, desperate. And then I felt the doorknob. It was just there, as if it had never been missing. I yanked it open and stumbled into the corridor, collapsing against the wall outside. I ran. I checked the time. Only an hour had passed. Only an hour had passed. My phone was inside. The camera, too, untouched. A blurry shot of a dark room. And in the far corner, a figure, tall, headless, standing exactly where I had seen it. There was no one else in the hallway. When I took the photo, just the soft click of my camera shutter and the echo of my own footsteps. But when I reviewed the shot, there was something behind me, and it had no head. I'm a photography student from Manila, and last summer I joined a small group tour. Most of the trip was pretty standard food trips, UK shopping and sightseeing. But I had one place I was dying to see for myself. The Diplomat Hotel. As someone into urban decay and long exposure night shop, I'd been fascinated by the place ever since I saw photos of the crumbling stone walls and that iconic cross still standing over the ruins. But more than that, I'd heard the rumors, the beheaded priests, the screaming at night, the headless. Naturally, I wanted to see if I could capture something, not necessarily a ghost, just a feeling, something atmospheric. I clicked the shutter, stepped to the side to stay out of frame, and waited. The shutter clicked shut. Our tour guide gave us about 30 minutes to roll. It was already getting dark when I wandered away from the others, climbing to the second floor with my tripod and camera. That's when I found it a long, narrow hallway where the far end was swallowed by shadow. Broken doors on either side. Moss creeping up the walls. Silent, still, perfect. I set up the tripod and dialed in a 15-second exposure. Just enough to catch that rich, ambient light and the eerie stillness. Pooh. And the arms hung too low, too long, like they didn't know how to be human anymore. I did a few more shots. There were no double exposures. And I was certain there was no one else on that floor. My dreams were filled with the crunch of broken tiles under footsteps that weren't mine, and the feeling that something was following me from room to room. In one of them, I walked slowly across the frame to try that ghostly blur effect. You know the classic motion trail look. You didn't say anything to it, did you? In that frame, standing just a few feet behind where I had stood, was the distinct shape of a person. No. He barely glanced at it before looking me dead in the eye and asking. Nothing felt off at the time. No sudden cold spots. No whispers. No feelings of being watched. Just me, the camera, and the silence. Ever since I got back home, I've been seeing things in mirrors, not full figures. Shadows that don't line up with my own. It wasn't until later that night in my hotel room that I reviewed the shots. Most were exactly what I hoped for. Dust particles glowing in shafts of light. Beautiful decay. Then, the fourth photo, blinked. At first, I thought it was a trick of the shadows, maybe my own blur from when I walked across. The figure's shoulders were stiff, almost unnatural, like someone standing there, watching, waiting, wearing what looked like a long robe. But the head there was no head, just an empty space above the collar, like it had been cleanly removed. I stared at the photo for a solid minute, zooming in and out, heart slowly rising in my chest. The headless figure was closer. The metadata was clean. The lighting was consistent. That night, I barely slept. The next morning, I went to show the photo to one of the local staff who managed the ruins. I said no, but there was nothing to say anything to. He nodded slowly and said, "Good. Don't answer when they appear. If you speak, they'll follow." I thought it was just part of the law, something to scare tourists. But I swear, and sometimes when I turn to walk away, I feel this strange weight behind me. I deleted the photo last week, but it didn't help, because 2 days ago, I came home and found a printout of that exact image sitting on my bed. Fresh ink, crisp paper, and in this